So in this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through kiosks, right? And kiosks are like you opening a shop on Sweet to sell stuff, mostly NFTs. Popular NFT collections like Prime Machine are using kiosks, not like a regular NFT standard. And so I'm just going to show you how you can do that, right? So the first thing, of course, is to declare our module. Just going to do that like this. Declare the module NFTs. Let's call our kiosk a kiosk, right? Now, the next thing we want to do is actually declare the NFT. So let's just do a simple NFT, call it art, and then we want to give it the key and store abilities. And so we want to also add a name. So I'm just going to type this in for it to import automatically. And then we also want to give it a URL. So it's just going to be URL. And then finally, we want to give it a balance. So we want our NFT or our kiosk NFT to be able to hold the balance. So it's going to be balance and sweet, right? Sweet, yeah. That said, the next thing we want to do is actually to declare two one-time witnesses for the role and configuration. You're going to see how we're going to use it later. And so it's just as easy as public struct rule has drop. So rule has drop and public struct config has drop. So I'm just going to now this should also have a store ability. So I'm just going to add that. Now the next thing I want to actually do is just write a main function, right? And this main function is supposed to mint an NFT, right? So just a function that just returns the NFT. In this case, our NFT is called art. So I'm just going to do public fun mint NFT, and then this should take in the name, right? So it should take in the name. It should also take in the URL, and finally, mutable reference to the transaction context. So mutable reference to transaction context, and then we want to return the art type, right? And so here we're just going to declare and return. So it's just going to as easy as object to declare a new object instance, and of course balance should be 0. So balance 0. Just going to quickly import this balance. So I'm just going to remove this and just do balance, right? Self, I mean, and then close off. Now, the next thing we want to do is to create a policy, right? And then when we create a policy, we're going to create a rule. When we create a rule, we're going to have to add a rule to the rule, pretty much enforcing. So and then pretty much enforce a rule, right? And so we're going to do that in a bit. But first, let's create the rule. Let's create the policy, right? And so it's going to be public fun create underscore policy, and then this function will take in a publisher and a mutable reference to the transaction context. And so it's publisher reference suite package publisher and then context mutable reference to transaction context. We're not returning anything. All we want to just do here is actually to just get policy and capabilities sent to those who should have it. So policy is going to be a shared object, and then capability is going to be sent to whoever calls the function. And so, pretty much transfer policy, which is something that's supposed to import, but this already does it for me. So just so you know, then you want to use the new arts, right? The new function, and just specify that it's actually on the art type you want to use it. So pretty much this, and then we can now pass in the publisher and the transaction context. So now we need to use these resources. And so first things first, we have to specify that this is a shared object. So as easy as transfer and public share object. then specify the policy. And so the next thing we want to do for the capability is actually transfer it to the transaction sender. So in this case, it says transfer and the regular public transfer. And so we want to send the cap, right, to ctx.sender, which is like the transaction sender. Great. And now we have two warnings. Two warnings are very important because first is that we are sharing an owned object, and secondly, we are doing a public transfer for an object that we also own. And so I'm just going to easily use the allow macro to ignore those two. And that's pretty much it. And so now we can add the rule to our policy, right? And so what we want to do here is actually just to add these two one-time witnesses here. So here's how we're going to do it. Public fun, and let's call it add row, right? So call it add row, and then we want to specify a policy, which is actually a transfer policy. And so it's actually a mutable reference to the transfer policy. Transfer policy on our art NFT. Right? Yeah. Right. So I'm supposed to actually import this, but I'm just going to allow VS Code do this job, or the extension actually. So same thing for capability, and then we want to reference the transfer policy cap, and I want that to get imported for me, so I'm just going to do this. And so pretty much specify the NFT or the object. I mean, we can now add a rule to transfer policy. So it's transfer policy, and then add rule, and this will take in the rule configuration. Those are like the one-time witnesses we created, right? And then config. Yeah, and so everything looks good now. So now the next thing we want to do is declare our functions that actually enforce the rules, right? So we've created a policy, we've added a rule, and the last thing we want to do is pretty much enforce a rule. So for example, let's actually just say that we wanted whenever anything happens, or whenever I say somebody transfers a coin, we want them to pay a fee. So let's just say it's 1 fee. Here's how you're going to do it. So it's public fund pay, right? And then specify the policy. It's transfer policy, and then of course specify the type. So it's this, and then do the same thing but for a request. So it's a mutable reference to the request, and so transfer request actually. So transfer request. I actually have to import this, so import transfer request. So I'm just going to allow VS Code do it once again, and then finally we want to specify the coin, right? So we want to specify that actually SUI in this case. So you can use it for any type you're trying to work with. So pretty much SUI, the SUI that we actually declared in our struct. And now in this function, we want to assert that the person actually has enough balance, right? So the coin that they sent to the contract, pretty much the package, is up to 1 SUI, right? Or is equal to 1 SUI pretty much. And so how we're going to do this is this. So first things first is get the coin's value, right? And then this is a reference to the coin object. Just going to remove this and self. And now the next thing we want to do is make sure that it's equal to a billion missed. So it's like this, specify missed, and this is equal to 1 SUI. And so if everything is true, or whatever happens, we want to eventually return something, right? So in this case, let's return a not enough, which I'm going to specify later. So just going to come up here and declare the constants. So const not enough u64, and we should just return 404 if that is not enough. So we have a problem here. What is it? if the currency contains a value, that's something that we're going to eventually use. And so now we want to transfer, want to use the transfer policy function, add the balance, and then add the receipt as well. So it's easy as transfer underscore policy and then add to balance. And the first thing we need to specify is actually the rule. So it's like this, and now policy and coin. And now we want to add receipt. So it's transfer policy, add receipt. And so specify the rule once again. Yeah, so finally you want to do a claim function or a confirm function. Pretty much like when you send an NFT to somebody, right? If you send a kiosk before on Sui, you realize that it's usually in limbo until the person has to go claim it, right? And so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go ahead to declare a function that allows the person to confirm that they want to receive or something like that. So confirm, and then this was going to take in policy and request. So in that case, I'm just going to copy this too, so I do not have to type out. And now we can now allow them confirm when they call this function. So it's going to be transfer underscore policy and now confirm request, which takes in policy and the request. So it's policy and request. Valid argument for parameter request. Okay, in this case, I'm not mutating anything, so this is just a reference actually. Or it's not a reference. Right. Now that everything works, what we want to do now is build it. So I'm just going to clear this off and just do sui move build. And everything works, right? And so that's how you work with kiosk.